Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join us, and we're hoping to just be able to share in our next career fundamentals. I always love the fun and fundamentals. I contribute that to our coworker Bridget. She's always bringing some fun and bringing the funk as well. But we're going to be talking about LinkedIn profile optimization. And I'm glad that Will is here as well, because he's actually going to be doing a follow-up in about 3 weeks, I believe, that's going to be focusing on reaching out, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But right now we are going to be talking about our fundamentals. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to have a couple of just different warm-up questions, because I would love to just hear a little bit more from you and get you ready on the chat. So we're making it really hard, but I want you to write in the chat. Tell me, are you more of a, would you think about this or that? Are you more of an Apple person, or are you more of an Android person? Like I said, we're going to do this pretty quickly, so don't worry about, Apple. See, yeah, I know. And they just got the new iOS, which I highly recommend. So, check that out. All right. This or that, would you prefer, if you could go anywhere, could go to the beach, spend a day at the beach, or would you rather spend a day in the mountains? All right. Got it. Oh, that's pretty
A
split.
little more split, a little more split.
I know, I did a little bit more split. Yeah. Okay. Would you consider yourself life of the party, or rather sit in the background, be that wallflower, especially with homecoming happening around right now? Oh, I got a lot. Oh, we got one life of the party. All right. I get that. Well, so this is safe. If we had a lot of more sit in the backgrounds, this making chatting comments in the chat here is much better. All right, we're going to do a couple of these types of things throughout our presentation. But I do want to start. I love starting with this or that too, and thinking about where you're at, because when you're thinking about your optimization, your profile, and that kind of thing, a lot of it is really thinking about, where do you differentiate yourself? Where do you stand out from other people? And a lot of people, a lot of things, it's just this tiny little things that you don't think are that important to your career or to the things that you are, but it really does represent your brand and who you are and how you want to stand out. So what we'll do that is, though, thinking about today, our focus for today is actually going to be just focused on two different things. So the first thing is thinking about what is your profile? We're going to focus most of our time on our profile. This is the first thing that people are going to see if they pull up your LinkedIn profile, or if they link to it somehow. Does it represent your brand? And let's talk about different ways that we can make sure that it's representing you in the best way possible. And then we'll talk about activity. So how visible are you? So it's one thing just to be on LinkedIn and to have, if somebody went to visit you, but are you coming up? Are you visible? And are there different ways that we can increase that visibility through some activity or other ways? And then I mentioned this already, but Will is going to be, in the past, I've kind of brought in a little bit more, but it got a little too much. So he's going to be focusing more on how to push outward from that and how to look into some different key contexts. So that'll be Thursday, October 27th at noon. And I definitely recommend RSVPing for that. So before you start, I want you to think, you don't need to write anything in the chat right now necessarily, but we want to spend some time thinking about your brand. And so what I want you to do is look at your profile right now. So you can pull it up, whether it's on your phone or something like that, but thinking about, what are the first impressions that you see when you look at your LinkedIn profile? Are you seeing things? Are you seeing different keywords that you really want to be? So I'm a career coach. Am I presenting myself in that best way possible? I know a lot of times when I'm doing these presentations, we're talking with students that are considering, switching up their brand, or they're kind of doing a career changing and that kind of thing. What I love about LinkedIn, and what I think is so great, is that a lot of times when you look at your resume is really focused on, this is who you are, this is what you've done, and it's there. But LinkedIn is kind of a melding between, this is what I have, this is what my past is, but this is kind of where I want to take it from here. So what are those first impressions? If I looked at your resume, or if one of our coaches looked at your LinkedIn profile, what are those first impressions they will see? The other thing is thinking about your brand is, what are those strengths? What are you bringing to the table? So are you out there and bringing, being really out there and that kind of thing? Are you really good at marketing? Is like public speaking something that's really good? Are you an excellent writer? Are those things coming out? And then is that something that they're looking for? So target audience is key. So it's not just thinking through, what is my brand and what do I want, but does my brand match those roles that I'm seeking? Especially for those of you who are actively job seeking right now, or will be in the next 6 months, I would say that target audience should be matching those job descriptions that you're wanting to apply for. Who might want to be recruiting you, and how are you matching that? And then differentiated, like I said before, this or that thing, how are you differentiating yourself? If you're an MBA student who is going through a lot of these leadership courses, what is differentiating you? Is it your past work experience? Is it this volunteer experience that you've done? Is it your strengths? And making sure that that's coming out loud and clear. So the biggest thing I want you to think about is that going back to that target audience, and that what are they looking for, and are you presenting it in that way? So what I want you to do is there's a million ways that we use LinkedIn, right? So in the chat, I want you to write down, just like type in like 1, maybe 2 things of like, well, how do you use LinkedIn? And when you're using it, what are some different things that you do? We got a job searching, contacting alums. Yep. And that's okay if there's not a thing. I mean, the reality is that there are, just a ton of different things. And so when I look at some of these different things, so keeping up with friends, promotions, and career paths. Yep, absolutely. So I have 4 things right here. Honestly, this is just scratching the surface. And there's so many different ways when you think about kind of exploring careers. I love to look at those exploring careers. And I think what's great about not only having a really good profile, but also when other people have great, strong profiles, I love being able to see their careers and seeing their profiles to say, okay, I think I would like this type of a job, but how did they get there? And is this something that like my path could actually go that route as well? Or would I have to match that path? Most of us know, we always say too, there's not one linear path to most roles, especially there's a lot of different ways that you can go, but being able to look that way can be good. So finding contacts, connecting with new people, there's a lot of different ways, but really a lot of it starts with that profile and looking and being able to see and matching that. So when we think about LinkedIn, a lot of, I have a stat here too that says like 93% of recruiters use LinkedIn. Honestly, I think I updated this last year and it's probably pretty much 99% to 100%. I did find that somewhere, and of course I didn't source it, I apologize. But the reality is it's used in a lot of different ways by both recruiters and other people too. And so making sure that we're getting that out there as well. All right, so put in the chat, and I won't rush you this time, but when you look at this profile, what is this person's brand? What do you notice about this person's brand? Or do you notice anything at all? So yeah, just type anything in the chat. Bland, their student. A student who is not looking for employment. I appreciate that as well, because it's like, okay, it's pretty obvious, right? It's very vague, it's bland, it's not really telling me anything. So this person, the student at Stanford University, they have a couple connections, there's really not any activity. There's Boeing in there, but not really. Maybe they did an internship at Boeing, but there's really nothing about this person that is grabbing you. I love the this kind of thing happens all the time with the pictures. Sometimes you're getting this like hand, or like somebody's cutting somebody else out. You can tell this person just, like Will says, you can tell this person just doesn't use LinkedIn all that much. And so when we think about the key elements of a great profile, this is one of my so I work a lot with our master's in business analytics students, and this is one of my former students that I think he just had a really good profile, and I've used his for a couple of years. But when you look at this too, there's a lot of different things, and not everybody's gonna look the same and is gonna follow that same method. And I think that's important as well, and it doesn't need to. But there's a lot of elements that you want to look through. So when we're going through this, what are those key elements here? So the first thing is an updated URL. So if you look at this, at the end, it says linkedin.com, and then at the end is his full name. if you are doing your, like just setting up your profile, or if you haven't really done much at all with your profile, you'll notice at the top in the URL, you will have a bunch of numbers and letters kind of at the end of that. So if you want to, and I would highly recommend this, is that all you have to do is go to your profile, and then the top right corner of that page, it says update URL, and you can change it to whatever you want. So mine is literally just says Erin Shamley. It just has my name without any spaces. But if there were a lot of Erin Shamleys, which thankfully there's not, I could have put Erin Shamley 1 or something, or Erin.Shamley, something like that. But what's great is that if you are sharing that profile with anybody, it just makes it a lot easier. It makes it cleaner. If you want to put it on your resume, that's something that's really a very quick and easy thing to do that shows that you've thought about it. The other thing is kind of a thanks, Will. The other thing too is thinking through your background image and having a great photo. So background image, I don't know if Will has other thoughts on this or anything like that, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. But the biggest thing is that it can help you to increase your brand and think about ways that you want to. A lot of students I notice will put something University of Minnesota based or something like that, because especially for those of you who are a full-time student, that can be a really good way to kind of say, hey, I'm a student, I'm here, and I'm out there, that kind of thing. Like I said, I work with a lot of our business analytics students. So sometimes I see some sort of like data science specific types of information. If you're really into marketing, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, or you just like to, like in a certain industry, if you're like more into retail, there's things that you can bring in. And that's different ways. But like I said, it's not absolutely necessary, but having something like that can be really good. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I feel too. Like I like cover photos, but don't think they're actually very critical. Having a great photo. So this is one of those things too. His photo, is it perfect? No, it's like a little bit of a background is like, it's his eyes. I can't really see because there is a little bit of a glare. The thing I like most about this is two things. One is that the face of like the element of where he is, he's not super far too close, and he's not too far away. And this happens too. I know every time when we do, even with Zoom, that's kind of called a lot of things to light. The amount of times that I'll meet with a student that they're just like way too close, or like just super far away that I'm seeing everything. A lot of that kind of thing can matter. Because, but the other thing that is huge is that there is he has a big smile on his face. And one of those things too is when you're looking at that photo, a lot of people are kind of like, well, I don't really know. I mean, like, how professional do you go? Do I have to be looking like this? But that goes into that aspect of what is your brand? How, are you showcasing so they're going to be able to see your smile? And they're going to look at that and say, oh, he looks like a nice guy, or she looks like she'd be somebody I'd like to work with, or something like that too. So making sure that those types of things are out there as much as possible can make a really big difference. The other things too, then moving down, thinking through your name, your headline, and your location. So the name, I wrote consistent name. So I work with a lot of international students, and this is a question that comes up a lot. So maybe some of my students have really a long name, and it's what they go by their first name. They typically go by a name that's kind of in the middle. There's a lot of ways that you can do that, but the biggest thing that I would say is just make sure that whatever you do, that you make sure that it's consistent across your resume, across LinkedIn, across like applications and things like that. So if you're a international student that prefers to have more of like an English name because you think it's easier to use, I would say that's absolutely up to you, and we'd be happy to talk with you about whether or not you need to do that, or if you want to or not. But the other thing is just make sure that it's very clear that this is who you are, that they would be able to find you either way. The headline for this person, when I took the screenshot, he was a student. And so he has marketing analytics, fintech, predictive modeling. If an organization or a recruiter is seeking, one of the first places that is going to come up in their search engine optimization is this headline. So what is that? If they're looking for marketing analytics or that kind of thing, this is where you really want to put that in. So he has used 3 different names and kind of separated them out. because he's kind of saying like, hey, I have experience in fintech and I really want to be doing marketing analytics. And so I want people to find me in those spaces. There are ways, and we'll go to in the next page, thinking about what different options that you could be using within headlines. This is not something you have to do, but the biggest thing that I would avoid is just saying, master's for this student with thinking Master of Science in Business Analytics at the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management, and that kind of thing. Because when you're looking at that SEO or, your search engine optimization, are they going to collect that? It's the same thing when I work with my students too. Are recruiters going to be seeking MSBA, or are they going to be seeking business analytics? Or analytics in general. So think about what those things are, what are those keywords, and making sure that you're kind of bringing those elements out into your headline. Location, I would say be a little bit broad. So right now you are in the, greater Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I would use that. I live in Apple Valley, Minnesota, so I technically could put Apple Valley, Minnesota, but I wouldn't do that. And it's kind of bringing in that. I mean, LinkedIn is a little smarter to be able to bring some of those different things in and realize that you're in that area. But the more you can kind of space that out, and the better. Sometimes what I'll see is students who are like, you know what, I'm currently a University of Minnesota student, but I know I'm going to be moving out to New York City after my program. So some students will start putting New York City a little bit closer. I think that's absolutely fine. I wouldn't do it like right now if you're not going to be out there within the next couple of months. But if you graduate in this coming May and you're going to be moving out there in June, regardless of whether you have a job, let's start putting it when you start job searching. There's no reason not to do that, because some recruiters, especially in this world of looking at those remote roles versus hybrid versus on-site, there's a lot more employers that are kind of feeling very strongly about, we want this person to be in here. And so that kind of thing can have an effect on that. Your summary or this about section is really important. So I notice this is one of the last things that students will do or add. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you can do with this, but I do think it's a really great way to kind of synthesize, bring in some great keywords through that, but also to synthesize some of your experiences and be able to showcase who you are and what you're bringing to the table. And then connections, you'll see that if seeing connections, if it's 500, once you get to 500, it's just 500 plus, that kind of thing. I have strong feelings about, just connecting with everybody and their mother. I feel like a lot of my students tend to do that, and I would discourage that, just because, yes, it's great to be connected. The more you're connected, the more you're going to see things, the more your name is going to pop up and that kind of thing. But just connecting with all these random people that you don't know who they are is not necessarily going to help you that much. But there's a lot of ways that you can build connections from make a connection, go to the next one, and so on. So let's go back to headline and dig a little deeper into that. So if we think about a headline, so there's a couple of things too. It's like I'm a data scientist or experienced senior financial advisor, brand management, that kind of thing. Here's a couple of different ways that you could do that, depending on, and we know there's different students from different programs in this webinar. But thinking through too, so like that first one says asset management, MS finance candidate. That could be a really good thing. The next one says data scientists. They want to work in product, but they're also bringing in some of these tools. So SQL R, Python, that kind of thing, because it might be more important. And then marketing, brand management strategy. If you're an MBA student, feel free to put that type of a thing in. It is up to you, but the bigger thing thinking about that is thinking through your SEO. And if you're looking for a job in asset management, just putting finance, MS finance at the University of Minnesota might not get you to where you want to be. And it's just kind of increasing that area and showcasing, this is who I am and this is the area that I want to be in. So once again, this is a great area to kind of brainstorm some different things, some different options, set up a meeting with a coach, and we can kind of help you brainstorm and think about what might be the best in terms of your own brand. I will note too, if you have any questions, I see Will's been answering some things in the chat, but feel free to kind of continue, and then I will trust Will to let me know if there's anything that we need to discuss in out loud. So we kind of talked about the headline. The about section is, like I said, I think this is a really important part. Once again, if you think through what recruiters are going to see in terms of your search engine optimization, we're looking at the biggest things that will come out in that SEO is your headline, and then your about section, and then from there beyond. And so thinking through that, if you have that about section, that is your opportunity to kind of bring in, like, this is who I am in a nutshell, and that kind of thing. We talk with a lot of students that want to bring in a summary into their resume. We usually recommend not doing that unless you have over 10 years of experience or something, but this is a great way to have that summary. It is typically not that long. The nice part with the about section is that you can put the see more. I mean, the see more automatically comes up if you have a lot more stuff, but really thinking through, focus on that first sentence and making sure that that is a summary. So if you have, like, I have 10 plus years of experience, or, if you're coming straight from undergrad, maybe you don't have that, but maybe focusing on like experience, analytics professional, or supply chain professional with X, experience in X, Y, and Z. Some of those different things. It can be first person in your voice. So some people will choose to write it in a way that says analytics professional, like I said, or you can also say, I am an analytics professional and I love to do these different things. So once again, what is your brand, and how, you want to maintain professionalism when you're doing this, but you can also showcase yourself as, having a little more fun with some of that kind of thing too. So using media, if possible, if you have something like a skill or accomplishment or something like that that you brought in, that can be a really good place to bring that as well. So let's go through a couple of examples of the about section or your summary. Obviously, this is not the best option that you would want to do, because all I'm seeing is business and analytic, and it should be analytics candidate, and then skills. And then I'm like, okay, well, I have to click on that see more if I want to see anything else. I mean, I guess it's intriguing me because you have skills, but other than that, I'm not really gaining anything from this. On the flip side, here's a couple of other examples. None of these are perfect, I mean, once again, thinking through your brand and what you want to be doing, but that next one says strategy consultant and analytics translator with 10 years of experience. Some of those are really big buzzwords. And then that next one I like too, because it does get a little bit more into that first person. I am a leader and creative thinker who does this things. I combine 3 years of these kind of things. And what I like about that, 3 years of classroom teaching with 5 years of corporate project management, 4 years of this, I love that, because this is a great example for some of you who might be in that career changing space, where you want to be able to bring in and showcase why your experience as a teacher would make you a great project manager, which, your job is to bridge those gaps and thinking through what are those different things. This is a longer example. And so what I think about is that if you look at this from like after that first paragraph, you're going to get to see more. So they're not really going to see, nobody's going to see any of the rest of that stuff unless they decide, oh, I want to learn more about this person. But what they will see is they will see analytics professional with 3+ years of experience in these things. But then if they do see more, they're going to be seeing all of these different things, which brings in a lot of those keyword searches. So some of these techniques, some of the technical skills. So if I'm a recruiter that I'm searching for some of these different things, a lot of that, a lot of those skills, those techniques, those things that I might be looking for, you would come up to the top with those things. Obviously, not everybody is a very data science specific example. But going back to that aspect of like, if you're focusing on finance, or you're bringing in asset management or some of those, or Bloomberg or some of those different tools that you might be able to use. So to kind of give that example. Okay, so using media in the featured section, I always feel bad that it's like his face is so huge. But This is the same student who has this about section where it's like, okay, well, there you go. That's what you're seeing. Then it's those see more. But right underneath that, he also has like these featured section, which brings in some different things to say, hey, if you want to learn more, if you want, there's a couple of different links. So it does show he has a portfolio, he has a GitHub account, which is very specific to analytics. But he also writes some different things for Medium. So this could be different projects if you were involved in a case competition or other things like if you're a part of a volunteer organization and you did something really cool, that's something that you can feature, that's something that you're proud of, a project that you're excited about. Some of that kind of stuff, if you bring in some of that media, it just gives them more opportunity to say, okay, this person's really involved, let's learn a little bit more about that. Okay, so if we move on down the line a little bit more, we're getting to that experience section. So there's different ways that you can bring in that experience section. But the biggest thing I would say is, so think about providing enough information to support the brand you're trying to communicate. So what I find a lot of times is that as students are seeking opportunities, if you're actively job seeking, a lot of times they're going to have a lot more information in the experience section than if they're not, so sometimes I see my alums that will, they end up just removing a lot of it because they don't really need to share as much of that information. But the bigger thing on the bottom, we say can be consistent with your resume. There is no reason that you cannot, and a lot of times we encourage this, is just like, if you've already been working with a coach or somebody else to make sure you have some really strong bullets in your resume, then there's no reason not to just copy and paste those bullets that are in your resume into your LinkedIn profile underneath that job. You've already vetted it, you've already feel really good about it. So no reason to reinvent the wheel. But if you want to, you can just put like a really, a very quick and dirty, like, hey, this is what I do here. These are the things that I do, bringing in some of those keywords. But just make sure that it is consistent with that resume. Sometimes what I'll do is I will see students that'll say, well, I can't fit all of this, like your resume is your one-page version of you. So sometimes there's extra internships or extra different projects that you might want to kind of add more to. That's absolutely fine, but within reason, kind of making sure that that is, lining up for the most part. All right, so other sections, there's a lot of different ways. This is typically, as I prepare this type of a presentation, I always look at, every time I look at someone's profile, it's kind of going down the line and making sure that these are the things that are coming across. So obviously you have your education, there's recommendations, skills and endorsements, and then groups and following. There's a lot of different other areas, but these are the ones that I want to cover first or for now. But if you have any questions about other ones, feel free to type them in the chat. So education, I always encourage, don't add anything before your bachelor's degree. There are exceptions to every rule. However, so a lot of times I see some of my students that will come in and they'll put in their high school and all of these certificates or like other courses that they took. There are other places that you can put some of those certificate and things like that. But for the most part, I would not put anything before bachelor's degree, but make sure you have that, because most organizations are going to want to see that you have your bachelor's and then kind of your master's as well. When you're putting it in LinkedIn, your education, all of you, if you are a current student at the Carlson School of Management, make sure to put it in right away. There's no reason to wait, and it showcases that you are a student right now. Sometimes just remember too that there are, to put it under Carlson School of Management and not like the university, the General University in Minnesota. If you really want to do that, I'm sure there's reasons for people to do that, but we do encourage you to, put it under Carlson School of Management and make sure it's really clear the master's of whatever degree you're getting. It can be a good place to add key courses. So if you're studying something specific, kind of like I said, if I have my examples with finance, if you're having some different courses that you're taking, or if you're involved in any activities, that could be a good thing to do. One thing I would say too is that the LinkedIn under education, it does allow you to put in different things depending on like the dates and depending on what you want. So there is some flexibility with that. I usually encourage to do it the same way that you would do it on your resume, which means that you just put in like the month and the year of when you're graduating. You don't necessarily need to put in the entire time. Yes. You don't necessarily have to put in for the entire time. Well, thank you for putting that in. If anyone sees in the chat, we'll kind of put a counterpoint for putting high school. I think about this as a good example as well. Sometimes if you, I lived in New York City for a long time, and a student worked at or went to Stuyvesant High School, which is like a very good high school in that area. And so he wanted to make sure that, like, it's important to kind of bring that out. Will, did you want to talk about your counterpoint?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I put in, I think your point is exactly where I was going with that, is like I have my Lake Stevens High School, which is just kind of a random high school in Washington State. I have it in there. It's mainly so that I can find alumni and they can find me if I wanted to connect with high school folks. But this is not a prestigious high school. So like locally here, maybe if you're thinking like St. Thomas Academy or the Blake School, those could be like, okay, that's got a pretty significant alumni community. And so that can be a great way to connect with your alumni community. But I even have a counterpoint to my counterpoint in that, like, your high school network's probably not going to be your strongest network. Your undergrad might be a little bit more valuable. I went to Seattle Pacific University. And so if I ever wanted to connect with, Falcon was our mascot out in Seattle area, then, maybe I tap into that network. But now that I'm here in Minnesota, I'm more likely going to tap into the Carlson network here. So, you can think about those education, not just as listing the degree, but how does that connect you through the system to other educational communities?
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for adding that, because I usually talk about that, but I had completely forgotten. So thank you. Okay, so recommendations, and well, if you have other things on this too, feel free to add. But recommendations can provide credibility. And so typically what that is, you've probably seen them on that kind of thing, but asking a past supervisor, if you've worked with a client or a coworker even, can be good people to ask. Just make sure that if you are asking them to write you a recommendation, be very specific with what you are hoping to receive and what you're hoping for them to write about. Because if you are looking for, a very specific skill that you might want to be like, hey, could you call out this project that we worked on? Or, I know you've mentioned that you've really appreciated my dependability or whatever those types of things are. Can you kind of bring those types of things in? Recommendations are not absolutely necessary. Obviously everybody uses LinkedIn and in different ways, and everybody uses different tools in different ways. But it's never going to hurt you to be able to have some of these different, a recommendation or two. And it can just provide a little bit more of that credibility and interest too from that. Yeah, and they may never read it, but it's one of those things, not in the most important part, but not going to hurt. So skills, this is an area that is really important. And one of the things too is matching the skills to the job seeking. And they will have a prioritizing skills. Make sure if you look at your profile, the top 3 are the only ones that will show up at, kind of at that top. And then everything else, it'll say like you have 25 other skills or whatever those things are. Make sure that those 3 at the top are the ones that are relevant to the work that you're trying to do and the ones that you want to be looking at. The amount of times I look at profiles and it's like public speaking when they want to become a data scientist is not necessarily, not that it's not good to bring in that kind of thing, but I wouldn't say that'd be one of your top ones. The bigger thing though too is that I always say when you're looking at skills or a job description, and you're looking at all these things that look really relevant, and you're saying, okay, they're looking for this skill and this skill. My suggestion is always go back to your skill section and say, have you added those? Is there anything else that you need to be adding to make sure that if an employer or a recruiter is looking for those things, that you're going to come up as somebody who has that skill. Well, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just had this thought today about, you had been talking about search engine optimization throughout this whole presentation, which is great to be thinking, recruiters finding you by basically using the system to search, so you've talked about SQL because I know that's big for your program that you manage, but if you
Mhm.
put SQL in your headline and then you put it in your about section, and then it's also a skill, then SQL is in there three different ways, right?
Mhm.
And if a recruiter's like, I want someone with SQL in the Minneapolis area, and boom, your profile now would be more optimized because it's in there in three different places. So
Yeah.
I just think you continually try to have the mindset of like, how do people find me? How do I optimize my profile? And the skills is just probably the second or third place where you should have some of
Mhm.
those skills listed. It's also in your about section. It can also be in your headline, depending on how important that skill can be for the work that you're trying to get into.
Mhm. Yeah, so there is a question here about asking, is the skills section necessary? And yeah, and it is harder too, like we said too, with data science, analytics. I mean, there's some very specific skills you're looking for. If you're in finance, maybe there might be more specific skills. But I would say don't worry about having them narrowed down too much. And like I said too, I mean, I think about even as a career coach, it's like, all right, well, what are my skills? Like coaching and presenting and like they can be a little bit more resume writing or whatever else. But don't feel like you have to have them narrowed down too much. Really be thoughtful about, as you're looking at some of those different roles, are you seeing some similarities in some of those skills, and which ones of those are you going to want to be putting up at the top, and bringing those types of things in. So I would say it is necessary because they're going might be looking for some of those specific things. But the more specific you get, and I mean, you can bring those things out in different ways. Um, that's kind of how I would answer that.
Yeah, I'll jump in too,
Yeah.
just to add kind of a technique you might use. For so many different things, I recommend using job postings as your guide or your cheat sheet. So if there's a type of role that you typically look for, uh, you're gonna start to notice these themes that everybody needs to have, whether it's Microsoft Office, which might seem kind of cheesy because almost everyone has that, right? But if that's always in there, then, well, probably for all the roles I have, I want to include that I have experience with PowerPoint, Word, Excel, etc. For that same posting, it might say you need to have good communication skills. They're like, you know what? That's how I would describe so I'm going to put those in there. And so using a job description, a job posting can be a great way to help you think, oh, I've got these, 10 things. I'm going to put these into my skills. A long time ago, LinkedIn limited the number of skills that you could put to 50. I don't know if they still have that same limit these days. They've segmented it into three different kind of categories of like more technical, more interpersonal. They've got quizzes now, which I'm not super familiar with, but those they really try to guide you through the process of adding skills as well. So it's a nice to have. It's a good, I mean, it's more than nice to have. I do think it's
I think
should be done, but don't it's not necessarily the first thing that you got to fret about when having your profile put together. Then when you have a little bit more understanding of like what you want to put into your profile, yeah, add to your skill set, see what LinkedIn suggests for you, see what job descriptions and
Mhm.
suggest for you, and that'll really help guide kind of adding skills to your profile.
Right. And I do like that exact thing too, where it's like thinking through those different skills. And then if you're seeing it in a job description, making sure you have it in your, one of the things I would say from where I sit too, like I said, I work with a lot of students that have more of those really technical, more specific skills. But at the same time, making sure, sometimes I get that pushback of like, well, I don't really know that skill that much. I don't know, like, do I have to be an expert in this skill in order to put it on? My biggest question would, well, first of all, I would say no. The second thing I would also say is think through of the aspect of like, if I brought you in for an interview and I said, tell me about your experience with that skill, could you tell me something about it and give me an example of it? If you could, add it. They're not looking, I mean, sometimes they're going to say, 3 years of experience in this with this specific technical skill. That's very different than, hey, we're looking for somebody who has exposure to or experience with Excel or whatever. So sometimes it's like, okay, we need somebody to do a VBA or pivot tables or something like that. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah, I've absolutely done a pivot table or two. And I could remind myself pretty quickly, even though it was 5 years ago that I did it. So yeah, absolutely. All right, great questions. Okay. So next thing is thinking about the groups and the following. So I do think too, it's a lot of things of like, some people it's easier to like, okay, I have like 1,500 connections already. I don't really need a lot of connections. Some people it's like, I have 100 and I have no idea how I'm going to get any more than that. And everyone's in a little bit of a different place. But what's great about groups is that groups can really open up your visibility. They can open you up to where you want to be. And so thinking through that too, it's like, what are those groups that I might want to be in? So going back to those keywords that you're finding, those keywords that you're looking for in your job description, those keywords that you're looking for in other places, search for groups, search for that keyword, and then search under groups. And you will find a lot of different places of ways that groups that you can connect with that could open up your search. So if a recruiter is coming through and searching for somebody who has experience with supply chain, because you're in a supply chain group and you might be looking for supply chain and maybe pivoting into that space, well, great. Well, now all of a sudden that's gonna make one more exposure that will kind of lift your profile up a little bit higher. So nice part too, some groups are, you have to get approved to be part of them. Some are just open and there's like, hundreds of thousands of people in that group. My thing is that it's not going to hurt to be a part of those different things. There's a lot of things that you can be doing to kind of be engaged in some of those groups and be more active in those groups, but at the very least, and I don't know if Will has plans on talking about this too, but what's great about being a part of those groups is that it also allows you to message other people that are within those groups without needing to pay for like the LinkedIn premium and do that, which is a really huge benefit. And so if you are searching for somebody that you're like, I'm not really connected with them, I've been maxed out on the people I'm reaching out to, find out, okay, wait, which groups are this person a part of? Maybe I need to join that group and then kind of continue from there. So it can be a good way to stay connected, and you can also like hide all of your alerts and stuff like that if it just makes you crazy. Let's see. Then if you meet with a recruiter for an interview, is it appropriate to make a connection with them on LinkedIn after the interview, or is it a bad idea? I think it's a decent idea. I think you absolutely have no reason not to, because that kind of thing too, whether it's a recruiter or if you're connected who's the interviewer too. So a lot of times with the virtual interviews, you might not even get that person's email, or you'll have the recruiter email, but you might not have the interviewer's email. Sending them a quick thank you and then a connection request. Would love to stay connected. Thanks so much I really enjoyed meeting with you. It can be the easiest way to send a thank you. If they are like, don't want it, the worst that's going to happen is they're just going to ignore it, or they'll actively ignore it or just ignore it. And so absolutely, I would say go for that. But yeah, good question. All right. So we're going to move into increasing visibility, which is good. I'm right on time. So within your visibility, there are a lot of different settings. And I would just say, if you haven't done this already, go through your settings and start looking. So if you literally go up to view your profile in the top right corner, and then it says settings, a couple of different sections are here: visibility of your profile and network. So who can see or download your email address? Who can see members you follow? Like who can see your last name? All that kind of thing. If you are actively seeking, I know some people have concerns about how visible, and that is absolutely up to you. But I would say if you are actively seeking, I would say be as visible as possible, or as visible as you feel comfortable with, because sometimes I'll go in and I'm like, okay, clearly they, unless I'm actually they're connected to them, I can't see them. And that can be a big deterrent for any recruiter or any hiring manager that wants to connect with you, but they're like third connection or more. So make sure, you'll see for mine, some of it is on. I haven't looked at it in a while because I've been in my job for 5 years and I like it and I'm not looking. But that kind of thing is moving from there. So another setting is that job seeking preferences. And so, share your profile when you click for a job. I have it as off I'm not applying for jobs right now, but I would, if I was, I would set that to on, because that kind of thing can make it, make you more visible. And that's something that is always never going to be a bad thing. Open to work. I just added this page just recently because this is a big thing that I'm seeing across. It's interesting too, and we haven't really talked about this as much as a coaching staff, but thinking about like whether or not you should use it. And the bigger thing I would say is you decide who sees it. So you can set it. What I would say is this right here, open to, or like right underneath that, it says like, show recruiters you're open to work. That will bring you to this page here that says, add job preferences. I would absolutely do that right now. If you are going to be searching, if you graduate in May or December, or even or you're looking for internships, it's not a bad thing to do, because one of the things you can say start date. If you're kind of like, okay, I want to be open, I want people to know, but I'm not like really in it right now, you can just stay flexible. I'm casually browsing. And then once you start all right, I'm really into this now, then you say, I'm actively applying, I'm looking for this right now. So job titles, you can put very specific. So what's great about that too, is that, put a lot of different things. If you're looking for a product manager role, put that, or maybe put project manager, or other things that are related to those things. Job locations, putting a lot of those different things. So I know some of the students I work with are very open to a lot of different things. So showcase that openness, but don't feel like within the job types. If you are looking for a full-time job, then don't start putting in, oh, well, I'd be open to an internship or that kind of thing. I would say if you're not going to be actively recruiting for that, just keep that there. What I would do is, as you get to at the bottom there, it says choose who sees you're open. And I'm not a big fan personally of this open to work thing. I think it looks funny. And to me, it just feels like it makes you feel a little bit more desperate, almost like, please hire me. I just really want a job. And you don't want to appear that way, right? Obviously, not everybody feels that way. But what you can do with that is that if you put it on as all contacts, just who sees it, then everybody in your network is going to be able to see this open to work thing. If you set that to recruiters only, you're still making yourself open, you're still showcasing, you're still going to get contacted by recruiters and other places, and people will be able to search for people who are open. But it's only that open to work thing is only going to search or pop up for those recruiters. At least that's from what I understand. And if you've heard different things, but that's what I would recommend, is that, be open, showcase all those job titles, all those different things, be as open with that as possible, but then, only share it with do the recruiters only thing. So you've gathered, Will?
Yeah, I feel like I've heard some negative press on the profile green little ring. I don't remember exactly why some people were down on it. But so I think what you've shared is good. I would say that this is an area that LinkedIn is always tinkering with. So as you were talking, I was partially listening, but also partially just looking at what are the most recent visibility settings. So this might also be something good to revisit whenever you're making a significant change, like when you land a new job or what you're doing right now. But maybe it's on an annual basis. You go back and look at what your visibility settings are, because you may have left them open from the last time you were job searching, or you may have closed them all off and now you are actively searching again. So I would say this is a good area to constantly revisit, because LinkedIn always changes to optimize their platform. As things move around, old settings disappear, but you might be like, oh, I don't want that viewed, or I do want that viewable now. So yeah, always good to go back and look at these settings.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because honestly, these last 2 pages, I had put this presentation together last year, and then was obviously tweaking it for this year. But these last 2 pages, I had to completely take new screenshots for all of the things, because LinkedIn has changed so much just within the last 10 months, I'd say. So yeah, that's a really good point too. So the thing I would have added this as well is just thinking about responding to recruiters. And so some of you, depending on the field that you're in or that kind of thing, with more visibility is that you're also, you might get more outreach from. So how do you respond? And the bigger thing that I would say is, when in doubt, respond, and then thank them for their outreach. And so if you have zero interest in it, at all, you don't see yourself going, just say thank you, but I'm not seeking right now. I appreciate it. Sometimes you're going to get a lot of those things. And this also for our students, this happens a lot within Handshake as well. I think they said something like 82% of, if you have your profile filled out in Handshake, you will also probably get contacted by recruiters. They're sending it to everybody who has this criteria or this interest. So it's just a matter of, but when in doubt, I would always just say, thank you. I'm not seeking right now, but I would look forward to keeping in touch with you in the future, or, but this, I'm actually looking for this type of a role. Never going to hurt in those things. So, oh man, I got to wrap this up quickly. So it doesn't take much to being active. I really want to focus on that. So thinking about inviting people to connect with you, joining groups, we talked about that already, but a lot of it is just kind of setting in, regardless of whether you are like kind of nominally searching or super actively searching, set aside some time to be active, 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. So like, congratulate if somebody got a promotion, to say, instead of just like liking it, you could also say, hey, congratulations. And then your name is going to pop up on so-and-so congratulated this person or something like that. It's kind of amazing how much of that. So, and if you're consistent with those things, the more of that is going to come in. You can like or share articles in line with kind of areas of interest or areas of where you want to be. Supporting others in their work, and then even like write your own, publish your own material. That's not a requirement. Obviously, that's kind of going into that next, but thinking through like, hey, I want to make sure like, hey, I was just wrote a thing about this and wanted to share it on LinkedIn. That's obviously something you can do. So this is our colleague, Bridget. She has brought this, and I just think it's the best strategy ever because it makes it super simple. And I just, so 3, 2, 1, thinking like if a strategy that if you take like once a week, if you're like liking, I'm going to like 3 comments or posts each week. I'm going to comment on 2 different posts or something each week that I see. And then I'm going to post, or I'm going to repost an article or something else that I'm seeing each week with a comment. So this article, oh, this really resonates with me. I think this is interesting. And, posting something like that. This is a really easy way to kind of stay active and stay consistent, and have, for those of you who like having something to cross off your checklist, this is a good way to be able to do that and make it a little bit simpler. So the last thing I want to talk about too is that this is that I had shared his profile before. I thought this was so good and so smart because, thinking of ways to optimize your visibility. So if you are bringing and you want to be more visible on LinkedIn, this is an example. This is something that he posted, obviously, when he was a student too. He just thought this was an interesting article. So he literally just shared it with no comments, no like anything. He just shared it. As you can see, he got 20 likes. That's like, yay, good for you. Like, I don't even know why you posted this. It doesn't mean anything. But from that, after that, he basically he posted this. He was in part of this like mini analytics type of thing. As you can see from this one, he's got a million different like hashtags, and like, he like tagged all of these different, everybody with like, he put a picture and he tagged every single one of his teammates on there. And if you see that too, he got 21 comments, he got 216 likes or loves or whatever. And he was adding value to something as well. One of the things too is that I added this information too after he ended up getting, I think he got a couple of interviews because of this post and another post. And it was just like, hey, you were out there, he thanked Dan, who is from the mini analytics team, who's like super connected with all of these different people in the space that he wanted to be. And so that kind of thing. And then he did this one as well, which was also, another cool thing that he'd done. This was just simply a work, like one of the projects, a homework assignment that he was supposed to do within the program. And I just thought that was really interesting as well. He got this, I think, even more likes and comments and that kind of thing from this, but it also just raised that interest. And then anything who was interested in Tableau or machine learning or something like that, it kind of increased there. So I see a lot of students doing this type of thing too. It's like, oh, I just graduated and I wanted to thank, or I'm a student and I want to thank these people for like, that kind of stuff. That kind of thing can really increase your visibility, as opposed to saying like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you guys help me? Because once again, that goes into that open to work, being a little bit, I don't know, desperate, that kind of thing, but really pushing something out there, making sure a lot of people are seeing it by hashtagging things and by connecting people that are part of that project, giving other people recognition along the way. So like I said, too, these don't necessarily have to be huge things. This is an example of a thing that you can put out there. This could absolutely just be like a homework assignment or a volunteer project that you've been working on. And it can be just a really fun way to kind of, share interest and get some information out there. Okay, so look at that. That's good. So next steps, the bigger thing that I would encourage you to do is, kind of these few things, just, from here, update your LinkedIn profile. And then I do encourage you to kind of meet with a career coach for a review. So if you look through and say, hey, is this optimizing? Are there any ways that I can improve that? Set aside a few minutes each week to be active. And some of the ways that I shared earlier, these can be pretty simple. They don't have to be a lot, but just committing to whether that's a time, and then attend that next fundamental so that you can move on towards that, past the optimization, and then, kind of thinking about how to outreach from there once your profile is all ready to go. That's good to know. So it says close, so we'll take a look at that. But yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and say something. Otherwise, if you do have any individual questions, you can always set up a coaching session. Oh, I said talent link. Sorry, I didn't update that. We just moved over to Handshake from Talent Link, and so it's still a work in progress. All right. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to stay on. I have a few minutes. Otherwise, I'm happy to connect with you at a separate time. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
I just updated the date range for the next sign up. So anybody who wants in should be all set now.
You beat me